gosh, this is so crazy.
You know we're rolling, right?
Oh. Tropical Girl Show. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am Pauline Batista, your host, your favorite tropical girl, I'm assuming. We also have Chris here behind the booth. Hi, Chris. Can you say hi?
Hi.
That was like hella mild. Can you say, no, can you like really say hi?
Hey, what's good? What's good?
Okay, this is gonna sound so crazy. Thank you for being back. But today's gonna be a very special show. Not because it's gonna be just special, but because I actually took allergy meds, and I'm very different today, so bear with me as we go. How's your day so far, Chris?
My day was pretty busy. You know, we have a lot of things happening here at the Forward Studios, but you know, no complaints.
What kinds of things?
Shows and commercials and business.
I thought you were gonna give me something more mysterious.
No, I'm going to be hella basic today.
Oh, okay. I mean, you can never be hella basic because you are you. Anyhow, so yay, whatever. Yay, clap everybody, clap, it's my birthday. No. All right, everybody. So, you know, we're just, you know, chatting. Of course, I like to catch up with, you know, Chris, but also with you. You know, go down the comment section right there and, you know, let me know how you're doing. You know, I take pride in responding each and every single one of you because I love you, because you're here. You could be doing anything. I mean, the internet has a lot of things, but you know, welcome again. Anyhow, so this week we're talking about something that is amazing. And I feel like we don't really talk about that nearly enough, right? I feel like this is a conversation that we're having today and that is so needed, right? Because we need to honor everyone's experience, right? On all the different people who live in this country and outside of this country. So today we'll be talking about, you know, queer folks and undocumented folks as well. These, you know, two groups of people really don't get, you know, much of a chance to be in conversation. So we need to be having these conversations like, you know, there's no tomorrow, because it's, you know, hella overdue, hella late. We're very lucky to have three of my favorite people here on the show today. We'll be talking about Homoland, which is an amazing series that they put together. They're activists, they're queer folks who do amazing work all over the country. And they are also Latinas, which is, you know, like really good. So basically today we have Laura. Laura is an activist. They're amazing, and I love them so much. I'm a huge fan. They always have the best clothes, the best hair, the best everything. We also have Danilo Machado, who is an artist, an activist, and is a curator, very famous in Brooklyn, darling. And we also have Anthony Barroso here, who is an activist and very dear to my heart. Laura, Danilo, and Anthony, thank you for being here, but it's not time yet, because you know that I have to give you some knowledge, right? I'm not just pretty, I have to give you some knowledge. Oh my God, that was so crazy. Totally blaming that on the allergy meds, but here we are. Okay, so my quote today is a quote that I got from the legendary Dominic Johnson, who plays Mother Electra on Pose, which is pretty popular if you haven't watched it. Anyway, moving on. She recently said that, recently/not so recently, she said that, you know, trans folks, queer folks will not ask for respect. They will demand it, okay? And like I said, it's overdue, so we need to be having these conversations, and I'm very honored to be sharing the space today with Laura, Danilo, and Anthony. Now, let's really bring them on. Laura, Danilo, and Anthony, welcome to the Tropical Girl Show. How are you? Eee! Oh my gosh.
Hi. So happy to be here.
So good to be here. I think we first need to like do a quick, you know, visit and talk about your looks real quick. Let's start with Anthony, because it's so dramatic, the background. So How did that come about, Anthony? Like, give me like a 30-second pitch / I don't know, Danilo. How do you call those really like description statement? Artist state? What's the artist statement for your ensemble / background today, Anthony?
Where's the wall
I was
text?
inspired by Danilo's aunt. I am the drunk aunt at the barbecue. So I have my sunglasses, mis gafas, on top, even though I'm inside. It's too hot outside.
Hot damn.
My shirt, I felt like it's very tropical, and I'm on the girl show, so that's what this is about. And my hair, I had just come back from my internship, and I just put it up in a little bun, and got my little Kaliusi's bangs. So here I am.
I was listening to her the other day running around the park and thinking of you, and I texted our other friend who's not here today, legendary Varun, and I was like, you know what? I was listening to Kali for the first time, and I actually like it. Let's just blame it on Anthony. Thank you, Anthony. Danilo, let's talk about your background and your vision for today's look, and you're legendary. So I'm kind of like I'm like very intimidated by you, Danilo. I'm very happy I got that out of the way first.
Oh my God. You're legendary. Oh my God. So I am wearing some chip nail polish that matches the accent wall of my most recent exhibition, We Turn, that I'm on view at EFA Project Space in Manhattan.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh yeah.
And then I'm wearing my my little flamingo shirt, so it's tropical. And then my best Miley Cyrus cardigan. Just got off the plane from LAX, and then my background is part of our branding for our ongoing series presented by Q Foundation, Homoland Security Come In Girl, which we'll be talking about today.
Oh my God!
And my DJ headphones.
You never disappoint ever. Laura, tell us a little bit about your, why you picked what you picked to wear today. Where are you coming from with this, look / presentation at the Tropical Girl Show?
I'm actually wearing my oversized pajama t-shirt.
Oh my God, yes.
Because I did do my makeup though, because, to match my hair, which I did like 2 days ago in preparation for our first event in the showcase. So I at least got that down, but I felt like it'd be fine to have the pajamas on since my power went out a little earlier and I didn't have to join my class today. But I'm here now. So
amazing.
That's I got a new septum ring today. Rings. That's pretty much the look.
See, that's why we hang out with those folks. Look at amazing. Thank you so much. I really need that. Well, my look, thank you for not asking, but it's fine. My look is really, I'm serving without anybody asking, but I do that, right? Y'all know me, I am. My look is just, a Fashion Nova, everything, whatever, always the same, crazy / a lot. Anyhow, so let's talk about Homoland. So why? Why Homoland? Where does that come from? First of all, I'm very curious to ask, who came up with the name? So why Homoland? Why that name? Let's just share that with the folks who are watching us today. Who wants to start? Do I get to pick, or do I have a volunteer?
I think maybe I suggested it during one of our brainstorming sessions, but it was something. Yeah, it comes from one of Julio Salgado's posters. He's like one of the most famous UndocuQueer artists. And I had seen it. I had been wanting to buy that poster for a while, so I brought it up. I was like, oh, this could be I brought it up as a joke for a name for a showcase, but then everyone liked it, so we ended up going with it. And I didn't think it would be picked, actually. But it was a good move, yeah.
Amazing. So, okay. So now we know a little, more about the name. So why did you feel the need, to have this, and let's just really, talk about it, from the get. Like, why, start, right after, during the end of Pride Month, right? So why was there a need? Let's talk about it really, for folks who are watching who are not at all familiar, right, with different experiences. So tell us why, why? What was the motivation? Maybe Anthony and then Danilo and then Laura. Okay, we'll do it that way. So what was motivation?
So, well, it started out with finding out about the open call for programming by Q and the Art Foundation in Brooklyn, and we were just kind of thinking about like what kind of project we wanted to do, and we, you know, being queer, being undocumented, being artists ourselves, we know the erasure that our community faces often in movement work and art spaces, and we know that undocumented queers have been leading a lot of the organizing around immigrant rights for years and often have not been credited to that. And there's so many undocumented queer artists doing amazing work years ago and still currently. And we wanted to create an archive of that. We also wanted to celebrate and really, you know, showcase and talk critically about how the movement and art making has progressed, and also the layers that occur within the organizing and art making world. And that's kind of how like our proposal came together. And it really just started as like a dream proposal where like, all right, like let's see if this happens. Like let's put everything that we can think of and that we would be really excited about doing, and like who are the artists, who are the folks, the historians, the organizers that we would love to include. And we were just, you know, brainstorming, and when we finally made the cut and got the fellowship, we were like, oh my God, like it's actually happening. And then we started planning it and reached out to the folks that we had in mind, and everyone was so excited. And, you know, we never heard a no, which also shows like the need for this kind of programming to exist, because I don't think it's something that really has been done in such a encompassed way of really creating an archive of the work that has been done from like the start of the Dream Act to now and onward.
Gotcha. So Danilo, where did you, because your background is, you know, very much hands-on art, you know, exhibition, museum curation. So where does your, you know, sort of, you know, skill set, you know, come, you know, how does that fit all together is my question. I know how it fits because I know y'all, but like how did that happen? I know who started the Google Doc too. But like how does your background, you know, add to that? You know, I mean, it really, I just want you to share a little bit about yourself, right? And how your, you know, such intersectional identity, you know, how did that, you know, contribute to the project?
Yeah, I mean, I think before I moved to Brooklyn, I was living in Connecticut and in community with these folks. And before I was a curator, I was an organizer.
Right.
And I've always sort of found community both, you know, in organizing spaces and, you know, in poetry spaces and art spaces. And for me, like, even now that I'm curating exhibitions, I'm also, you know, curating programs, both, you know, in person and now like virtual. And so I really believe in the sort of power of gathering people,
right,
whether in a physical room or in a Zoom room, and it's sort of using programming, using conversation, using performance to expand ideas, either related to an exhibition or not, or just like in general. Like this occasion was sort of a series of programs that came together. And I was familiar with Q 2 years ago. My friend Claire and I did also apply for the open call and actually didn't get it, but they liked the proposal so much that they like still offered to do the program like a little later in the year. So we did a program about mentorship in the arts for people of color. And it was in person and it was really great to work with them. And so when I saw this open call, I had been thinking about what Anthony was describing about this erasure and sort of the need to create this archive and sort of just to prevent like these voices and these stories from being lost. And I just knew both like personally as a queer undocumented person and as like, you know, as a person always like in the arts, like I knew how central like the artists and the organizers, and you know, for a lot of folks there's no really distinction between the two. Most, you know, a lot of folks that we're thinking about, and you know, us, we're both, we're sort of, and that we don't see it as separate work. And so it made total sense to call up.
Gotcha, that makes sense. Wait. Sorry, did we lose Danilo? Are they froze? Did they freeze?
I think it's frozen.
Yeah, they froze for
Always, you know, never a dull moment with Danilo. Hopefully we'll get them back at some point. But, you know, meanwhile, because we really want to honor folks, you know, stories and, you know, identities, and, you know, because Anthony talked about erasure and whatnot. When you think about your journey in community organizing, Laura and Anthony, like, it's pretty obvious for, you know, for folks who have been doing the work, but I you know, again, we're doing this, you know, it's Tropical Girl Show is really, you know, to everyone. So when you think about your journey as community organizers, like how early on did you understand that you needed to be an organizer, that you really needed to kind of, you know, rise to the occasion? I really hate that expression, but like you had to really rise to the occasion, because otherwise you were not going to get access to what you needed as a human being and as an individual. Laura and then Anthony. And Danilo will join at some point. You know how they are. They're just, you know, they're orbiting their star. So they'll get here at some point. So Laura and then Anthony.
Yes. It sounds like their computer shut down and it was being homophobic in that sense. So we'll be back soon, hopefully. But yeah, thank you for that question, Fayeni. Good to reflect on that. I think I really got involved in like undocumented. I definitely got involved in undocumented spaces first when I was in high school, and one of the first events I was involved in was actually with Danilo and Varun, who's not here. I met them through, because I'm the youngest, I'm the baby of the team, so I met them. I met them through a youth leadership retreat in high school. So it was definitely really impactful for me, and I knew that it was important for me to be able to find my voice and be able to share the things that mattered to me through undocumented spaces, because I grew up just like, you gotta be ashamed of your status, right. You can't talk to people about it. And then I knew I was undocumented for a long time, and then I came out as queer in college. So I found myself in a lot of like UndocuQueer spaces, and I found myself reflected in a lot of artwork and a lot of the people that we featured through the work of a lot of people that we featured in Homoland security. Right. So yeah, those are just really powerful spaces for me. And throughout the pandemic, I kind of like, one of the silver linings of the pandemic was being able to come back to like a lot of Connecticut spaces and join the Connecticut Undocu Fund. So the four of us were involved in the Connecticut Undocu Fund, and that's how, like in meetings where it was like 15 people, like if one of us was like made a random queer joke, even if if everyone else was muted, you could see like the four of us just like being the only ones laughing. Wow. So it felt like a natural progression when Danilo was like, oh, we should like do this like UndocuQueer thing. And I was like, yes, why haven't we like formed this group of queers within this undocumented space before? So I really appreciate that. I appreciate Danilo for bringing that up. Definitely appreciate this space and what we've been able to highlight through it.
Thank you. So Danilo, since you since you decided to depart, I'm joking. So we're just because Anthony talked about how those stories are erased, right? And we don't talk about them. So now we're actually talking about their own y'all's own personal journeys with community organizing. So my question was a really general question. So when was it that you that you understood that you had to rise to the occasion? It's I'm based on my identities. I'm not getting what I need. I'm not getting the care that I need, I'm not getting access to what I need to live, not only to live, but to thrive as a human being. So that was the question. I just made it more dramatic now because you're here. Anyway, so now let's go to Anthony and then you. So Anthony, when did you have to, when did you feel like you had to rise to the occasion?
That's a very, I would say, many times in my life, right? Because as a teen, I struggled a lot with various challenges, dealing with family separation when I was like going through my adolescence, and then going to high school, and just being my mom and I, and struggling financially, and also struggling with my sexuality and with fitting in, and going to like an all-white high school that was hella racist. There were many times where I just felt super powerless and like I didn't have a voice. And it wasn't until I started college, and I was, I also was a young father, and I realized that like something needs to change. Like struggling this hard shouldn't be a thing. And I started to meet other people that were struggling too, and specifically queer people that were organizing. And that's kind of how I fell into organizing, because I met folks who were doing work around fighting for queer rights and trans rights, and also organizing for labor movements. And that was like my first experience in like really supporting movement work, and I was very new to it. And it was also like in a space where I was doing so much, like working 3 jobs because I didn't have like any money, and I had to support myself and my son, and I was trying to figure out my sexuality and separating from my son's mom. And it wasn't until a few years later that I went to a vigil in Hamden, and it was the first time I heard people talk about their undocumented status and use the phrase, "I'm undocumented and unafraid." And that to me was so revolutionary. That to me was like, wow, like I always felt like I had to choose an identity of like what I was fighting towards, whether it be my queerness or my, being working class or my immigrant status. I never felt like it was an intersectional thing. It wasn't until I met folks from C4D that I realized I didn't have to pick and choose like what I fought for, that I could be all of myself and still, fight alongside many folks. And I learned so much from many organizers who, were doing the work. And that's how I fell into organizing. And the more I joined meetings and the more that I, learned, I realized that I didn't want to work that much because I didn't have the time to devote to organizing. So I cut back on working. I also started going to school more, and I started organizing more. And then I became an organizer for C4D. And that just completely changed my life, because it really taught me about like building grassroots power and like working with young people and hearing the way that they think about like how change is created inspired me so much to really think creatively and critically. And it just, I feel like I'm constantly growing. But sorry, it was such a long-winded answer, but I feel like my journey into, deciding like when things have to change has been like a long haul of like
Gradual.
7 years plus. And it wasn't until I was like 21 that I realized like, oh, like we do have the power to make a change. And then I saw it, being like through tangible wins that were local. And yeah, and so that's how I.
Thank you. I didn't know you were over 21. That's all new news to me. Wow.
I'm 28.
No, but seriously, like thank you so much for open up and for being so vulnerable. Now,
Yeah.
Danilo, are you back?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so tell me, when did you first feel like you had to, you had to rise to the occasion when it comes to community organizing?
Totally. I mean, some kind of like what Anthony was sharing, sort of hearing people declare themselves as undocumented and unafraid for the first time in high school, like as at a C4D meeting in in Stanford, like, totally changed me. And it was so unexpected. And it was also like during a time where both of these identities were sort of both inseparable and like un like I couldn't ignore them anymore. They seemed like unmovable. Like it was clear that like as I was applying to colleges, like my status was like playing a role, and like, and thinking about, discovering my queerness, and so being at that first meeting, like, and hearing people declare that so boldly, sort of got me involved right away, and eventually also connected me to this whole like movement, not just sort of in Connecticut, of like young and documented people like fighting and winning, and winning like legislative and policy victories, but also like community building, and then through that also connecting with queer and documented folks in Connecticut and around the country doing the same thing, and sort of asserting these intersections, and like talking about the ways that the immigration system disproportionately has affected queer and trans people, and how sort of, all of our liberations are intersected and like intertwined, and like building a community where, like, as Anthony was saying, like you don't have to choose one or the other, where you can sort of show up as your full self. And yeah, and it's been almost 10 years since that moment, and I continue like learning so much from that work, even though like my organizing looks different, my my own sense of like self and queerness like has expanded and deepened, like my own undocumentedness has also changed, but those those years were so formative.
Right, thank you. And it's so crazy to me that you said that, because that's something that I was actually thinking about, community organizing. For those of you who are watching and are really not familiar with that idea, I mean, it changes from community to community, like, what community organizing looks like, right? It could be anything from fighting, to have access to, better transportation in your community, or, I mean, it really varies, right? As each community has different demands, right? And in your community, I'm sure that the demands are different from mine, and Danilo's, and then Anthony's, and then Laura as well. Now, my next really serious question, because, I'm a curious tropical girl, is, because, I feel like, and that kind of happened to me, right, as a Black Latina, as a Black Brazilian in this country, who rarely finds community within my own, community, I guess, because most Brazilian people who migrate here, like, white passing, and I'm Black, right? So that's different. So I think that one of the things that I've always thought about, and maybe I'll just, ask the three of you this question, is usually our journeys and our narratives are attached to some kind of institution, right? And when I say institution, Tropical Girl Show watchers, I don't mean like mortar brick institutions with walls, but I mean like institutions in general. Like, for example, like, church and the people within church, that community is an institution, right? So my question to our panel today is, what is the role of institutions in supporting community organizers? An institution could be anything, from universities to you name it. So what do you think the role of institutions is in supporting community organizing? Let's go Anthony, then Laura, and Danilo, or whoever wants to talk. This is really the Tropical Girl Show. It's like our show. We can do whatever we want. So anybody, go.
Yeah, I could kick it up. I mean, institutions, let's say universities, right? They can pay organizing, grassroots organizing orgs and people and groups and collectives that are doing the work that are, you know, like our undocumented, our queer, our immigrants, our Black, like not paying like nonprofit, white-led organizations to come in and like guess on like what communities need, but actually like talking to communities that are impacted, that are leading the work, that are doing the work in communities. I think like that is really important and often forgotten about. And you know, I just think about like my my time as an undocuqueer trainer with C4D, and
shout out to
like,
C4D. What's
the
poppin'
model
C4D?
of the
Hashtag commercial. Anyway, go ahead. Hashtag ad for C4D. Anyway.
The model of the program is that, you know, like we are undocumented students and young people that, you know what it's like to navigate the college process and trying to attend an institution and dealing with all the bull and lack of support and racism and xenophobia and constantly hitting barriers. And so like we don't only like come in and say like this is what's wrong, but we're like, this is how you fix it and this is what you should do. And like there have been times where people are like, okay, yeah, like come, but like they're iffy about paying us, or you know, it's like, or they don't want to sustain a long-term relationship. And it's like, if you're really committed to making this change, like you'll have no qualms about paying and committing to like a lasting, you know, collaboration that really will impact your institution and the climate of your institution for your students, your undocumented queer students. You know, like that is the kind of work that needs to happen. And often like some people are like, yeah, we'll do like a 30-minute training and we won't make it mandatory for everyone to come and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, what kind of change is that gonna do? Like,
absolutely.
You know, like you have to really be committed to it, like the work and follow the lead of people that are impacted.
Absolutely. Anybody else wants to add to that?
Yeah, totally. It's such a good question, and a really tough one because, you know, as Anthony's describing, like institutions, whether it's a university or a nonprofit or a church or like a community center, can have like very necessary resources to redistribute, whether those are like monetary resources, whether paying it, like, you know, C4D pays organizers for their work as they should be paid, or whether it's be like non-monetary resources where it's space, you know, like a lot of times, like, you know, clubs at colleges and universities, like, you know, all they need to do like transformative work is a space and like an occasion to be together. Or it could be something like mentorship or like, you know, development resources where like, whether it's like a professor that mentors folks, or a class that provides like, you know, useful organizing or like empowering resources for folks. Sort of all those things can be really supportive of community organizing and community organizers. But at the same time, a lot of times institutions, you know, are exclusive, are not sort of safe or like safer spaces for everybody, are not always led by the people most impacted, are not always structured in empowering ways, and sometimes can like reproduce these systems of hierarchies and oppression where like, you know, folks might be like exploited for their labor, where folks might, you know, have unempowering dynamics with other people in the institution, whether it be peers or like, you know, executives or professors or like any other people involved. So because of those reasons, it's always, you know, some folks, including ourselves, are are sometimes building our own institutions
Right.
and our own collectives, our own projects, our own like mutual aid organizations, because a lot of times like the existing ones are either failing or like not doing enough, or not doing it in a way that is like actually inclusive and accessible to everybody all the time.
Thank you so much, Danilo. Lau, did you want to add, or you're good? You don't have to. This is literally the Tropical Girl Show, everybody. Like, there's no, you know how people do panels in the academy, and it's like, oh, everyone has to say something, and when it comes to your turn, you're like, shit, I ain't got nothing to say. What do I do? That's me all the time. So it's, you know, if you want to add, you add. If you don't, then we move on. You know.
I mean, I agree with everything that Anthony and Danilo just said. I think I just wanted to like build off of like what Danilo was just saying about like institutions, like and having to like build the institutions. I think I was thinking about how a lot of institutions make you like relive or like recount your trauma in order to get a lot of these resources. So that's something that we really highlighted when we were doing with the Connecticut Undocu Fund. We had some sponsors who were able to give us funds to redistribute to members of our community, and that mutual aid work was within the state awarding funds to undocumented folks across the state who didn't have access to stimulus checks during the pandemic. So being able to like do that work without making anyone who was applying like prove that they're undocumented somehow or prove that they had a need was so important to be able to do what we wanted to do and to be able to I think a lot of the people that we contacted ended up being really suspicious about if like we were like any other like government agency coming in here and trying to give them money. If a lot of them, when we didn't like distribute the checks super quickly because we're a small team, I know some people reached out and weren't sure if this was just like a trick or or like when we called, they weren't sure if we were like scammed. So it makes sense that a lot of people are like don't trust a lot of institutional spaces, and even when we were creating kind of this became kind of like institutional relationship with us being the ones who were like providing money. It's important to recognize those things and not make people have to like give up so much of themselves in order to like get these like handouts that don't end up actually being handouts but like paying people for their trauma. So that's another type of like institutions, just kind of letting people like giving people resources without having strings attached to them, to show that you're actually supporting the people that you may say you're supporting on paper.
Yeah, there's so much of that. I can't remember who said that exactly, but especially like the academy, right? And when I say the academy, it's not like it's universities really. Like there's this crazy thing about, you know, coming in and guessing what people need, and I'm like, I participated in so many studies. You know, I was literally the guinea pig of so many studies from the entirety of my career as a person. I guess being a person is a career now. Blame it on the allergy meds, but anyway. So, you know, yeah, they have this thing about, you know, going in and guessing what people need, and it's kind of like so crazy. Like, why would you like for someone to walk into your home and guess what you need? Like, that's the example that, you know, I always give to people, right? My next question is a random question. So, you know, whatever happened to Anthony, I hope they're well, I hope they're sound, I hope they join at some point, but you know, we're going we're more towards the end now. So my question to you is, who was your celebrity crush at age 15? Danilo waiting for the question of a century, right? They're like, oh my God, there she comes. Anyway, do you want time to think?
No, I know.
Okay, all right. Then make it known, darling. You're at the Tropical Girl Show.
So my big teenage crush was Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Oh. Were you like super obsessed? Did you have like posters on your walls and whatnot?
No, I don't have any posters. But I love that movie he was in, 500 Days of Summer, when I was a teenager. It's like, wow. Nowadays, I think all straight people are ugly, and I'm not attracted to them at all.
Oh my God.
But, you know.
Oh my God.
Gross.
I mean, I know that I don't know. How about you, Lau? Did you have a celebrity crush at age 15?
Well, I look back at a lot of things now in retrospect. So there were, I think, a lot of like crushes that I made up for myself. Yeah, I think. Well, I don't know about age 15, but I do remember my obsession with like Twilight, and definitely being obsessive. Like thinking, I was like, I'm not sure if I'm Team Edward or Team Jacob, and then I ended up being Team Bella. So I'm definitely looking back on that, and I think Kristen Stewart was definitely up in that list before I could admit it. But those were good times.
That's so sweet.
Yeah.
I like, these are the moments that I appreciate the most. So nobody asked my crush, but I'm gonna respond to questions anyway. Can you officially ask me, maybe Danilo, like, who was your celebrity? So I don't feel so alone.
So,
Okay.
but tell us, who was your celebrity crush at age 15?
It was a white guy, skinny white guy. His name is Alex Band, and he's the lead vocalist to a band called The Calling. They had like one hit, and it was, I'll go wherever you will go, na, na, na. Guess what? Now he follows me on Instagram. You know he follows me on Instagram. Oh, okay. Funny. See, Chris finally woke up. You know, he was sleepy anyway. So my next and final question before we get to how is it that folks can, you know, register for Homoland as it's still happening and available is, how can individuals support y'all? Like, you know, outside of institutions, you know, because I know that, there's institutions that point to communities and say, oh, you should do 1, 2, and 3, right? But there's also individuals that are kind of like, interesting. I think if they fixed X, Y, and Z, they would be better. That happens, right? Let's give some advice to folks who are not, you know, who don't identify as part of the community, right? How can they advise and suggestions? How can they support y'all? Give me cash. I'm joking. That's not. That's just me all the time. Default ask. Anyway. So how can folks, you know, join and join, not join, but like support more than anything?
I mean, I think that's a great response point.
Oh my God.
I'm also gonna send the link to our events in the chat. I don't know if you were about to do that, Anita. But there's like, if you like, even to not just support us by coming through to our shows, and then support the artists within our shows. We'll be pubbing all of their work, and you can show monetary support is definitely a valid form of support, and we will also have a poster that's being sold and proceeds will go to Mariposas Sin Fronteras, because it's another great organization that does work on undocumented queer intersection.
Amen to that. Danilo?
Yeah, totally. And just to add to that, I think in general, just like asking people what they need.
Right.
Like asking like both like, you know, communities, you know, to know like what communities you're a part of and what communities you like might like want to support as not just as an ally, but as a sort of co-conspirator, as an accomplice
right.
in
I was gonna ask, do you like the term ally?
No, it's too easy. But, you know, that can look like a lot of ways. That can look like, you know, showing up to these events and maybe, you know, learning about some of these artists, some of these organizers. It can look like, you know, sort of doing reading and sort of learning more about these communities, and particularly about the organizations that are providing many different kinds of support, whether that's like, you know, something like Connecticut Students for a Dream that is, you know, doing leadership development this summer with our summer program, or whether it's sort of your local food pantry, you know, might need volunteers. And then honestly, in your personal life, like just asking people what they need and making your resources available, and not just monetary ones, but you should be redistributing your wealth.
Thank you.
You should make mutual aid part of your budgeting practice, and should be doing it consistently, even post pandemic, which, doesn't even, whatever. Should be doing it consistently. But also in terms of like, who are you connected to that others might not? Like, how can you like share opportunities, share knowledge, share, food, share time. I try to ask my friends, if like, how can I support you regularly? And sometimes like, I had a friend recently that was like, I know that like these next 2 weeks are going to be really tough for me. Do you mind like leaving me like a short, like affirmative voicemail a few times this week? I was like, yes.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
Thank you for that specific ask, and how I can support you. And it gets easier to develop language both for yourself and like for others. So like really name the things that you need, and it's hard, especially for many reasons. Folks are like often told that their needs are not important or less important or don't exist. But obviously that's not true. And we all deserve to sort of be in like not just inclusive, but like sort of to thrive in spaces and to be like holistically supported by community.
Yes, people are like, oh, X, Y, and Z turns me on. It's so great to hear X, Y, and Z. But literally what really turns me on is when I see people asking, how can I support you? Instead of just assuming, right? That's a huge, don't laugh. That's a huge turn on how can I support you? If you're listening,
yes.
You know what I'm saying? That's really the question that you want to ask. You know what that's so crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you both for being here. I don't know what happened to Anthony, but he is here in spirit. There, his essence is here.
We have another call. We have a call for the UndocuFund at 7, which is why he.
Oh, I see. So my two quick questions for you are: first one is, where can folks register for Homoland? And my second question is, do you want to be found on social media? If not, then that's not a problem at all.
Yeah, the link is in the chat for how to register for Homoland. It's on Q's website. Q is CUE Art Foundation. I'm gonna send the link also again. Yeah, I don't mind being found on social media. Tell you that either.
All right.
Yeah, it's just qfoundation.org. You should see it on their programs page, but if not, it's like /Homoland -security -come/in/girl with a U. And our upcoming programs are July 8th and July 31st, and they're all free and virtual. So please join us, and you can find me on Instagram and Twitter and Venmo at Queer Shoulders.
Hey, okay, and Venmo. I love you so much. Thank you so much for coming to the Tropical Girl Show. Y'all are watching, leave comments, down here. These conversations are necessary. Those two are legends, and I'm very grateful that they were here with us today. So a hand to Danilo and Laura. Thank you so much. Thank you. Love you. Mwah. Love you so much. Oh my gosh. Chris, wasn't that a lot to process?
That was a lot to process, yeah.
Right? It was amazing.
It was great. It was a
Because
great
I feel like, sorry, what was your take? Have you ever had the conversation about, what queerness and undocumentedness looks like?
I've never had that conversation, which is why it was a very, very interesting topic for me, because that's a whole thing that I would never even think about in my day-to-day life, but here we are having that conversation. It's just like, wow.
Yeah, and to me it's and again, just to reiterate, queer folks at this point, I mean, respect and love and honoring their experiences is really a demand. It's not an ask. It's something that we should be doing. I mean, I'm sure you love respect, right? You know, like, I mean, you like being respected. So now that they came here and they talked to us, they were generous enough to share, time and space with us today, we know what to ask. So the key question, the $1 million question is, how can I support you? So, and that goes for just about any community and most conversations. How can I? Never hurts, right? Because I, for example, a lot of people ask me, so what should I do? I mean, you really start with that question. So really, how can I support, or how can I is the question. Anyhow, everyone, thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you for bearing with the Tropical Girl on allergy meds. And this was the Tropical Girl Show. I'm gonna go home because I'm gonna drink some water. You know what I'm saying? Take a nap. But I love you all. Keep commenting. Find us on social media at the Tropical Girl Show. Bye. Thank you. Bye. Cut.